The howling wind carried death on its breath as Katherine Ellis fought against the blinding snow, her fingers numb and her hope dimming with every labored step. She had been a fool to believe she could make the journey alone, but desperation had pushed her forward when wisdom would have kept her in town. Now, as the December storm of 1878 raged across the Colorado Territory, she was paying the price for her recklessness. The wagon wheel had snapped 2 miles back, leaving her stranded in the growing darkness with temperatures plummeting by the minute. Katherine had abandoned most of her belongings, taking only what she could carry as she set out on foot toward what she hoped was the direction of Silverton. But the swirling snow had disoriented her, stealing away landmarks and direction until she was stumbling blindly through deepening drifts. "Just keep moving," she whispered through cracked lips, her voice immediately torn away by the wind. "Keep moving or die." Her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, sending her sprawling. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, and for a moment she simply lay there, the cold seeping through her sodden clothes as the temptation to rest washed over her. It would be so easy to close her eyes just for a moment. A distant sound penetrated the roaring storm, the muffled thud of hoofbeats. Katherine raised her head, certain her mind was playing tricks, then she heard it again, closer now. "Hello," she called, struggling to her knees. "Please help me." The dark shape emerged from the swirling white, a horse and rider, moving deliberately against the storm. Katherine tried to stand but found her legs unresponsive, the cold having claimed them already. The rider dismounted in a fluid motion, approaching cautiously as if she might be a mirage that would disappear with his proximity. He was tall, his face obscured by a snow-crusted bandana and the brim of his hat pulled low against the storm. "Madam." His voice was deep, carrying easily through the howl of the wind as he knelt beside her. Strong hands gripped her shoulders as eyes the color of a summer sky studied her face with an intensity that seemed to warm her frozen skin. Slowly, he pulled down his bandana, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, a short beard dusted with snow framing a strong jaw. For a moment, he simply stared at her, something like wonder crossing his features. "I've been looking for you all my life," he said, so softly she almost didn't hear it over the storm. Katherine blinked in confusion, certain she'd misheard him. "Sir, I'm freezing to death." The strange spell broken, he nodded once, all business now. "Name's Ryder Callahan, madam." "Let's get you somewhere warm before this storm claims us both." Before Katherine could respond, he had lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to his horse. "My things," she protested weakly. "We'll come back for them if we can," he replied, settling her in the saddle before mounting behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, his body warm against her back. "But right now, we need to get to shelter. My cabin's not far." Katherine leaned back against him, too exhausted and cold to argue. As the horse moved steadily through the storm, guided by Ryder's confident hand, she wondered about those strange words he'd spoken. A delusion, surely the desperate wishfulness of a man too long alone in this wild country. No one had ever been looking for Katherine Ellis. She had spent most of her 22 years being profoundly unwanted. "Stay with me," Ryder murmured against her ear, his breath warm. "Talk to me. What's your name?" "Katherine," she managed through chattering teeth. "Katherine Ellis." "What brings you out in this weather, Miss Ellis?" Katherine tried to answer, but darkness was creeping in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she remembered was the tightening of his arm around her waist as she slumped against him. "Don't you die on me," she heard him say as consciousness slipped away. "Not when I've just found you." The crackle of a fire was the first thing Katherine noticed as awareness returned. She was wrapped in thick blankets, her damp clothes replaced with an oversized shirt that smelled of pine and tobacco. The cabin was small but sturdy, a single room with a stone fireplace that cast dancing shadows across rough-hewn logs. Snow continued to batter against the windows, but inside was warm impossibly, wonderfully warm. "Welcome back," came a deep voice from her left. Katherine turned her head to see Ryder Callahan sitting in a chair beside the bed, whittling a piece of wood with a sharp knife. He'd removed his coat and hat, revealing thick brown hair that curled slightly at his neck. "My clothes," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "hanging to dry." He gestured toward the fireplace where she could see her dress and undergarments spread on a line. "Had to get you out of those wet things before you froze to death. I didn't look more than necessary, madam, I promise you that." Katherine clutched the blankets tighter, mortified yet grateful. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Callahan," he shrugged, setting aside his carving. "Couldn't very well leave you out there." Standing, he moved to a pot hanging over the fire. "Think you could manage some stew? Need to warm you from the inside, too." Her stomach growled loudly in response, drawing a low chuckle from him. "I'll take that as a yes." As he ladled stew into a bowl, Katherine took the opportunity to study him more carefully. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work, his shoulders broad beneath his flannel shirt. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, though the wilderness had a way of aging a man beyond his years. "What did you mean?" she asked when he returned with the bowl. "When you found me in the snow, you said you'd been looking for me." Ryder handed her the stew, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "Did I say that? Must have been the cold talking." He turned away quickly. "Eat while it's hot." The stew was rich and flavorful, filled with venison and root vegetables. Katherine ate slowly, savoring each bite as warmth spread through her body. When she finished, Ryder took the empty bowl. "You never told me what you were doing out there," he said, settling back in his chair. Katherine hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. But he had saved her life, and deception seemed a poor way to repay such a debt. "I was leaving Durango," she admitted. "I had a position as a schoolteacher there, but there were complications. I was heading to Silverton to start fresh." "Complications," Ryder repeated, studying her face. "The kind with a name and unwanted attentions." Katherine looked down at her hands. "The town banker's son. He wouldn't take no for an answer, and his father owns half the businesses in Durango. When I rejected his proposal, suddenly I was unsuitable to teach children." Ryder's jaw tightened. "So you left?" "I had no choice. My reputation, you don't have to explain," he interrupted gently. "I understand running from something. Most folks out here are doing the same." "And what are you running from, Mr. Callahan?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A sad smile touched his lips. "Not running from, running to." He stood abruptly. "You should rest. Storm's not letting up any time soon. We're stuck here for at least a day, maybe more. I've imposed enough. Perhaps there's nowhere to go, Miss Ellis, not in this weather." His tone was final but kind. "I'll sleep by the fire, you take the bed." Before she could protest further, he had moved across the room, spreading a bedroll on the floor near the hearth. "Mr. Callahan," she called softly. "Thank you, truly." He nodded once without looking at her, and Katherine settled back against the pillows. Exhaustion overtaking her once more, morning arrived with a hushed stillness that spoke of deep snow. Katherine woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day came rushing back as she saw Ryder stoking the fire, his back to her. "How long did I sleep?" she asked, sitting up carefully. He turned, a brief smile crossing his face. "About 16 hours. You needed it. 16 hours." Katherine pushed the blankets aside, horrified at her own indolence. "You should have woken me." "For what purpose? Storm's still got us trapped, though it's let up some." He gestured toward the window where sunlight now filtered through, illuminating the swirling dance of snowflakes. "We've got nowhere to be and plenty of supplies." Katherine realized she was still wearing only his shirt. "I should get dressed." Ryder immediately turned his back to give her privacy. "Your clothes are dry. I'll step outside for a moment to check on my horse." Once alone, Katherine quickly donned her undergarments and dress, grateful for their familiar comfort despite the lingering mustiness of dried dampness. By the time Ryder returned, stamping snow from his boots, she had made the bed and was attempting to bring order to her tangled hair. Storm's broken, he announced. Still snowing, but lighter now. Road to town will be impassable for another day at least. I see. Katherine twisted her hair into a simple bun, acutely aware of his gaze upon her. I don't wish to be a burden. Ryder hung his coat by the door. You're not. Truth is, it's nice having company. Gets lonely out here, especially in winter. Do you live here alone year-round? He nodded, moving to the small kitchen area. Going on 5 years now, I raise cattle on the south pastures in summer, hunt and trap in winter. It's a good life, if solitary. No family. The question was presumptuous, but Katherine found herself curious about this quiet man who had saved her life. None living. His voice was carefully neutral as he set a kettle to boil. Parents passed when I was young, no siblings. My father died in the war. Mother remarried and moved east with her new husband. They didn't have room for a grown daughter. The old hurt had dulled with time but never fully healed. I've been on my own since I was 18, Ryder glanced at her. Teaching? Yes. I trained in Denver, then took positions in small towns. Durango was my third school. Katherine moved to the window, gazing out at the transformed landscape. Everything was buried under a pristine blanket of white. It's beautiful in its way, deadly but beautiful. Like most worthwhile things in this territory, Ryder agreed, coming to stand beside her. For a moment they both simply watched the snow fall in comfortable silence. The day passed quietly. Ryder showed Katherine his small bookshelf, offering her anything that might interest her. She selected a volume of Whitman's poetry, surprised to find such literature in this remote cabin. When she commented on it, a hint of defensiveness crept into his voice. Just because I live in the wilderness doesn't mean I've abandoned civilization entirely, Miss Ellis. I meant no offense, she replied quickly. I simply wouldn't have guessed you for a poetry enthusiast. His expression softened. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She brought her books west with her and taught me to value education. He paused, a distant look in his eyes. She would have liked you, I think. The simple statement touched Katherine deeply. I would have liked to meet her. They shared a simple lunch of jerky and hardtack, which Ryder apologized for. When the weather clears, I'll shoot us something fresh. Please don't apologize. I'm grateful for your hospitality. Katherine hesitated, then added, though perhaps I might cook dinner. It's the least I can do to repay your kindness. You don't owe me anything, Miss Ellis. Katherine, she corrected gently. After all we've been through, I think formality seems rather unnecessary. A smile warmed his eyes. Katherine then, and I'm Ryder. That evening, Katherine prepared a meal from Ryder's stores, a stew thickened with flour and flavored with dried herbs she found in a small tin. It wasn't elaborate, but Ryder ate with such appreciation that she felt absurdly proud of the simple accomplishment. As darkness fell once more, they sat before the fire, Katherine reading aloud from Whitman while Ryder returned to his carving. The intimacy of the scene wasn't lost on her how quickly they had fallen into a domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. Do you miss teaching? Ryder asked during a pause in her reading. Katherine considered the question. I miss the children. The joy of watching them discover something new, the sense of purpose. She closed the book, running her fingers along its worn spine. What about you? Do you ever miss civilization? Sometimes, he admitted. Mostly in winter when the nights are long and silent. But then spring comes, and I remember why I chose this life. He set aside his carving, a small wooden horse, she realized. Freedom has its price, but I've always found it worth paying. Freedom, Katherine echoed, tasting the word. Had she ever truly been free? From one obligation to another, one set of expectations to the next, her life had always been defined by others' needs and demands. You're thinking too hard, Ryder observed, his voice gentle. A lifelong habit, I'm afraid. She smiled ruefully. My mother always said my mind was too busy for my own good. Sounds like a gift, not a failing. He stood, stretching his tall frame. We should get some rest. If the weather holds, we can try to recover your belongings tomorrow and see about getting you to Silverton. The reminder of her interrupted journey brought Katherine back to reality. This interlude, pleasant as it was, remained temporary. Soon she would continue on her way, and this cabin and its solitary inhabitant would become nothing more than a memory. "Yes, of course," she said, rising as well. "Good night, Ryder." He hesitated, looking as if he might say something more, then simply nodded. "Good night, Katherine." As she lay in his bed that night, listening to the occasional crackle of the fire and Ryder's steady breathing from his place on the floor, Katherine wondered at the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. Had the wheel not broken, had the storm not caught her, she would never have met this quiet, thoughtful man who quoted poetry and carved wooden horses by firelight. "I've been looking for you all my life," he had said in the Snowstorm. The words returned to her now, puzzling and yet stirring something deep within her chest. Foolishness, she told herself firmly. The desperate utterance of a lonely man in a moment of confusion, nothing more, yet sleep was long in coming that night. The following morning dawned clear and blindingly bright, the sun transforming the snowscape into a sea of diamonds. Ryder was already gone when Katherine woke, a note on the table informing her that he'd gone to check the road conditions and would return shortly. She used the time to make herself as presentable as possible, washing with melted snow water and arranging her hair neatly. It was important, she decided, to reclaim some dignity after being rescued like a helpless damsel. Ryder returned mid-morning, snow clinging to his coat and hat. "Road still deep but passable with care," he announced, stomping his boots at the threshold. "We can head out after noon, should reach your wagon before dark." "That's wonderful news," Katherine replied, ignoring the small twinge of disappointment she felt. "I've made breakfast." They ate in companionable silence until Ryder suddenly set down his fork. "What will you do in Silverton?" The question caught Katherine off guard. "Find another teaching position, I hope, or perhaps work as a seamstress until something suitable opens up. And if nothing does?" She straightened her shoulders. "Then I'll move on to the next town. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Callahan. I never suggested you were." His expression was unreadable. "It's just that Silverton's a rough mining town, not many families, not much call for a schoolteacher." "I'm aware of the challenges. You could stay." The words hung in the air between them, surprising them both. Katherine stared at him. "Stay here?" Ryder's cheeks colored slightly, but he held her gaze. "Old Tuckson's only 15 miles south, small but growing. They've been looking for a teacher since fall, proper schoolhouse and everything." "How do you know this?" "I do go to town occasionally, Katherine." A hint of amusement colored his tone. "For supplies and news. Sheriff Jenkins mentioned it last time I was there. Said they've had trouble finding someone willing to come all the way out here." Katherine's mind raced with the possibility. "Old Tucson," she repeated. "In Colorado Territory, Arizona Territory, actually. We're just south of the border here." Ryder watched her carefully. "It's a decent place. Good folks, mostly. You'd be respected there." "Why are you telling me this?" He looked away, suddenly interested in his cooling coffee. "Seems a shame for you to struggle in Silverton when there's a position waiting in Old Tucson, that's all." But that wasn't all, and they both knew it. There was something growing between them, tentative and fragile as a new spring shoot, but undeniable. 3 days ago they had been strangers. Now the thought of parting left a hollow feeling in Katherine's chest. "I would need to see the town," she said finally. "Speak with whoever's in charge of hiring." Ryder's eyes met hers, hope kindling in their blue depths. "We could go tomorrow. It's an easier journey than Silverton, especially in this snow." "Tomorrow," Katherine agreed, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "But first, I need to recover my things." By early afternoon they had set out on Ryder's horse, Katherine seated behind him with her arms wrapped cautiously around his waist. The snow was deep but no longer falling, and the sky above was a brilliant, almost painful blue. The world had been transformed into something pristine and new, wiping away the danger and fear of the storm. "There," Katherine pointed when they had traveled about 2 miles. "I think that's my wagon." Only the canvas top was visible above the snowdrifts, but as they drew closer, the outline of the vehicle became clear. Ryder helped Katherine dismount before wading through the snow to examine the damage. Wheels completely shattered, he reported, kneeling beside the wagon. Axles cracked too. Must have hit a rock buried under the snow. Katherine joined him, dismayed by the extent of the destruction. Can it be repaired, eventually? Not here, though. We'd need to get it to a blacksmith. Ryder stood, brushing snow from his pants. Let's gather what we can carry now. I can come back with a sled for the rest once the snow's settled more. They worked together to salvage Katherine's most important possessions, her teaching certificates and credentials. A small box of jewelry that had been her mother's, clothing, and a few precious books. Ryder lashed the trunk to his horse, along with a smaller valise containing immediate necessities. That should see you through until we can retrieve the rest, he said, helping Katherine back onto the horse. We'll need to hurry if we want to make it back before dark. The return journey was slower with the added burden, but Katherine found herself savoring each moment. The pristine wilderness stretched around them, majestic and humbling. Occasionally, Ryder would point out features of interest: a hawk circling overhead, the tracks of a fox in the snow, distant mountains with names she tried to memorize. It's breathtaking, she said as they crested a rise, revealing a valley below, untouched by human presence. I've never seen anything so vast and empty. Not empty, Ryder corrected gently, just living by different rules than we're accustomed to. As they rode, Katherine found herself sharing more of her past, her childhood in St. Louis, her father's death at Antietam, her decision to become a teacher against her stepfather's wishes. In turn, Ryder spoke of his own journey west as a young man, seeking opportunity after the war had claimed both his father and his family's Tennessee farm. I worked cattle drives at first, he explained. Saved every penny until I could buy my own land. It wasn't much at the start, just the cabin and 50 acres, but I've added to it over the years. You've built something to be proud of, Katherine said sincerely. Ryder was silent for a long moment. It's a good life, he said finally, but a solitary one. The implication hung between them, unspoken but acknowledged. They reached the cabin as dusk was gathering, shadows lengthening across the snow. Ryder helped Katherine down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The contact sent a flush of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the exertion of the journey. That evening, after a simple dinner, Ryder brought out a map and spread it across the table. Here's where we are, he said, pointing to a spot near the Arizona-Colorado border. And here's Old Tucson. It's small but growing. The railroad's coming through next year, they say. Katherine leaned over his shoulder, studying the map. Their proximity sent a pleasant shiver through her, and she noticed Ryder's slight intake of breath as her hair brushed his cheek. What kind of town is it? She asked, forcing herself to focus on the map rather than the warmth radiating from his body. Decent. Started as a trading post, grew with ranching. Some mining now too, but not the boom and bust kind like Silverton, more stable. Ryder traced the route with his finger. Sheriff keeps order. There's a church, a doctor, about 200 people last I heard, and families. Children who need teaching, Ryder nodded. Enough to warrant a school. The town council approved funds for a teacher's salary last summer, hired a woman from back east, but she only lasted a month before deciding frontier life wasn't for her. Katherine straightened, moving away slightly to clear her head. And you think I'd be different, more suited to frontier life? Ryder turned to face her, his expression serious. I think you've got more courage and determination than most men I've known, let alone women fresh from the East. You survived a blizzard that would have killed many. You didn't complain once about your circumstances, and you're still intent on making your own way. A small smile touched his lips. Yes, Katherine, I think you're exactly suited to frontier life. His faith in her was both flattering and terrifying. I'll need to see it for myself. Of course. Ryder began folding the map. We'll leave first thing tomorrow if the weather holds. That night, as Katherine lay in Ryder's bed for what might be the last time, she found her thoughts in turmoil. The practical choice was clear: investigate the teaching position in Old Tucson rather than press on to Silverton, where prospects were uncertain. But practicality wasn't the only factor driving her decision, and she knew it. There was something about Ryder Callahan that had gotten under her skin in the brief time they'd known each other. His quiet strength, his unexpected depth, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled, all had combined to create an attraction she hadn't anticipated and wasn't entirely comfortable acknowledging. "This is madness," she whispered to herself in the darkness. "You barely know the man." Yet when morning came and she found Ryder already saddling his horse for their journey, the sight of him in the early light sent a flutter through her stomach that couldn't be explained by mere gratitude or friendship. The ride to Old Tucson took most of the day, though the weather remained fair. As they approached the settlement, Katherine felt both excitement and trepidation building within her. The town was indeed small, a single main street with wooden buildings on either side, a church steeple rising at the far end. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the sounds of human activity grew as they drew closer. "What do you think?" Ryder asked as they rode down the main street, curious eyes turning to observe the newcomers. "It's quaint," Katherine replied diplomatically, noting the muddy thoroughfare and rough-hewn buildings. Yet there was a certain charm to the frontier settlement, a sense of possibility and growth that appealed to her. Ryder guided them to a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Dollar Hotel and Restaurant. "Best place in town," he explained, dismounting and reaching up to help Katherine down. "We can get a hot meal and find out who to speak with about the teaching position." The interior of the establishment was surprisingly clean and well-maintained, with a restaurant on the first floor and rooms above. The proprietress, a robust woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, greeted Ryder by name. "Callahan, don't often see you in town this time of year." Her gaze shifted to Katherine, openly curious, and with company no less. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Katherine Ellis. She's interested in the teaching position." Ryder removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "Katherine, this is Margaret Holloway. She owns the Silver Dollar and knows everything worth knowing in Old Tucson." Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "A teacher? Well now, that is interesting. Mayor Harrison will want to meet you right away." She gestured to a nearby table. "Sit down, both of you. I'll send Billy to fetch the mayor while you have some lunch." Before Katherine could respond, the woman had bustled away, already calling orders to the kitchen. Ryder guided Katherine to the indicated table with a light touch at the small of her back. "Is she always so efficient?" Katherine asked, bemused by the whirlwind reception. Ryder chuckled. "Margaret runs this town in all but name. Her husband was the first mayor until he passed 10 years back. Now she's content to pull the strings from behind her bar." They were served a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, a luxury after days of simpler fare at the cabin. Katherine was halfway through her meal when the door opened, admitting a portly man in his 60s, red-faced from his hurried walk through town. "Callahan," he boomed, approaching their table. "Margaret says you've brought us a schoolteacher." Ryder stood, shaking the man's hand. "Mayor Harrison, this is Miss Katherine Ellis. She was on her way to Silverton when the storm caught her. I mentioned your need for a teacher." Mayor Harrison turned his attention to Katherine, who rose and extended her hand. "Miss Ellis, you're a sight for sore eyes. We've had that schoolhouse standing empty since November, with 20 children running wild through town instead of learning their letters." "I'm happy to discuss the position," Katherine said carefully, "though I'd need to know the terms and conditions before making any decision." Of course. The mayor pulled up a chair without waiting for an invitation. $30 a month plus room and board at the teacherage small house behind the school. Term runs September through May, but we'd want you to start immediately if you're agreeable." The salary was far better than she'd received in Durango, in fact. "I'd want to see the school and living quarters first," Katherine said. "And I have my own teaching materials and methods. I would expect a certain degree of autonomy in the classroom." Mayor Harrison nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. We're not looking to tell you how to teach, just that you do teach." He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "Between us, those children need a firm hand. Last teacher was too soft, couldn't control the older boys, ran her out of town within a month." Katherine straightened her spine. "I assure you, Mayor Harrison, I am quite capable of maintaining discipline in my classroom." "I don't doubt it," he replied, eyes twinkling. "Any woman who survives a blizzard and turns up with Ryder Callahan has got more backbone than most." Ryder shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Katherine's decision to stay or move on is entirely her own, Mayor. I merely mentioned the opportunity." Of course," the mayor stood. "Why don't I show you the school now? No time like the present." The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple but sturdy structure with large windows and a small bell tower. Inside was a single large room with rows of desks, a pot-bellied stove, and a teacher's desk on a raised platform at the front. It was basic but functional, with a decent slate board and even a small bookshelf containing readers and primers. "Books are limited," the mayor explained as Katherine examined the shelf. "But the town council approved funds for more if you provide a list of what you need." The teacherage behind the school was equally simple, 2 rooms consisting of a combined kitchen and sitting area, plus a small bedroom. It was sparsely furnished but clean, with the luxury of a proper cast iron stove for cooking and heat. "It's not fancy," Mayor Harrison admitted, "but it's private and convenient to the school. Previous tenants have planted a small garden out back in summer." Katherine walked the rooms, imagining herself living there. It was modest but far more comfortable than some places she'd stayed. The independence it offered was appealing. Her own home, her own classroom, a fresh start. "When would you need my decision?" she asked as they returned to the schoolhouse. "Well, the children are expecting to return to lessons on Monday," the mayor replied, "so by tomorrow if possible." He glanced between Katherine and Ryder. "I understand you might need to retrieve belongings from Mr. Callahan's property first." The assumption in his tone made Katherine blush slightly. "My wagon broke down during the storm. Mr. Callahan rescued me and has kindly hosted me until conditions improved." "Of course," Mayor Harrison said, though his expression remained knowing. "Well, think on it tonight. You're welcome to stay at the Silver Dollar Town. We'll cover the expense for a potential teacher." He shook Katherine's hand. "I hope you'll consider us, Miss Ellis. We need someone like you." After the mayor departed, Katherine and Ryder stood alone in the schoolhouse. Sunlight slanted through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. "What do you think?" Ryder asked quietly. Katherine ran her fingers along the smooth wood of the teacher's desk. "It's a good opportunity, better than I might find elsewhere." She turned to face him. "But I can't help wondering why you're so invested in my decision." Ryder stepped closer, his expression serious. "When I found you in that storm, something happened that I can't explain. Call it fate or providence or just dumb luck, but I felt." He paused, struggling for words. "I felt like I'd been waiting for that moment without knowing it." "You said you'd been looking for me all your life," Katherine said softly. "I did." His gaze was steady on hers. "It slipped out before I could stop it. Must have sounded like the ravings of a madman. Perhaps, or perhaps not." Katherine's heart raced as she took a small step toward him. "I've never believed in such things. Love at first sight, destiny, they seemed like stories for children, not real life. And now," his voice had dropped to a near whisper, "now I don't know what to believe." She looked up at him, seeing the hope and uncertainty in his eyes. "I barely know you, Ryder. Then stay and get to know me." He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "Stay in Old Tucson, take the teaching position, give us a chance to see if there's something real here." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading up Katherine's arm. It would be so easy to say yes, to leap blindly into whatever this was between them, but caution had been her companion too long to abandon it entirely. "I need time," she said finally. "This is all happening so fast." Ryder nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Of course. You have until tomorrow to decide about the position, and whatever you decide about that doesn't have to determine other things." He stepped back, giving her space. "I should see about rooms at the Silver Dollar." As he turned to go, Katherine called after him, "Ryder." When he looked back, she continued, "Thank you, not just for saving me but for showing me this opportunity. Whatever I decide, I'm grateful." He tipped his hat slightly, a small smile touching his lips. "My pleasure, Miss Ellis." That evening, Katherine dined alone in her room at the Silver Dollar, thoughts tumbling over each other like stones in a stream. The teaching position was promising everything she could hope for professionally, but accepting it meant staying near Ryder, and that complicated matters immensely. There was no denying her attraction to him. In just a few days, he had awakened feelings she had thought safely dormant after her disastrous experience in Durango. But was it wise to make life decisions based on such a new and untested connection? A knock at her door interrupted her contemplation. She opened it to find Mrs. Holloway holding a steaming mug. "Brought you some tea, dear," the older woman said, handing it to Katherine. "Thought you might need a woman to talk to." Surprised but grateful, Katherine invited her in. The proprietress settled herself in the room's single armchair with a sigh of relief. "Been on my feet since dawn," she explained. "Running this place isn't getting any easier as I get older." Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, cradling the warm mug. "It seems like a successful establishment." "Can't complain." Mrs. Holloway studied Katherine with shrewd eyes. "So you and Callahan, interesting pair." The directness of the comment caught Katherine off guard. "We're hardly a pair, Mrs. Holloway. We've known each other less than a week." "Sometimes that's all it takes." The older woman's expression softened. "My Walter proposed 3 days after we met. Scandalized my mother, but I knew he was the one. 40 years we had together before his heart gave out." "I'm not looking for a husband," Katherine said firmly. "I came west to teach, to be independent." "And who says you can't have both?" Mrs. Holloway leaned forward. "Listen, dear. I've known Ryder Callahan for 15 years. Watched him build that ranch of his from nothing. He's a good man, honest, hardworking, respectful. Not like some of these cowboys who blow through town looking for liquor and trouble." Katherine sipped her tea, unsure how to respond to this unexpected character reference. "The thing about Ryder," Mrs. Holloway continued, "is that he's always been alone. Keeps to himself, does his business, goes back to that cabin of his. Never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you." "You've known me less than a day, Mrs. Holloway. Why are you telling me this?" The older woman stood with a grunt. "Because good men and good opportunities are rare in this territory, Miss Ellis. When both appear at once, a wise woman takes notice." She moved to the door. "Sleep well. Mayor will want your answer in the morning, after Mrs. Holloway left. Katherine stood at the window, gazing out at the quiet town. Lamps glowed in windows, silhouettes moving behind curtains, families together at day's end. She had spent so long focusing on her independence, on proving she could survive on her own, that she had never seriously considered what she might be missing. The night brought little sleep and no clarity. By morning, Katherine was no closer to a decision than she had been the previous evening. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a simple blue calico that had survived the journey in her trunk, and went downstairs to break her fast. Ryder was already in the restaurant, seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral. "Good morning, Katherine. Did you sleep well?" "Not particularly," she admitted, joining him. "Too much on my mind." He nodded, understanding. "Mayor Harrison will be by at 10 to hear your decision." "And what about you?" she asked directly. "What will you do if I decide to continue to Silverton?" Pain flickered briefly across his features before he masked it. "I'll wish you well and help you on your way if that's what you want. And if I stay," his eyes met hers, intense and hopeful, Then I'll court you properly if you'll allow it, no pressure, no rush. Just a chance to see where this might lead. The simple honesty of his answer touched her deeply. Before she could respond, the door opened and Mayor Harrison entered, waving cheerfully as he spotted them. "Miss Ellis, beautiful morning, isn't it?" he called, making his way to their table. "Have you had time to consider our offer?" Katherine looked between the two men, the eager mayor and the quietly watchful Ryder. In that moment, clarity came at last. Whatever happened between her and Ryder, Old Tucson offered what she had been seeking all along: meaningful work, a community that valued education, the chance to build something lasting. "I would be honored to accept the position, Mayor Harrison," she said firmly. "When may I begin?" The mayor's face split into a broad grin. "Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You can move into the teacherage today if you like. We'll announce your arrival at church tomorrow and classes can begin Monday morning." Plans were quickly made. The mayor would have the teacherage prepared immediately. Katherine would spend the day meeting town council members and parents. Ryder offered to retrieve the remainder of her belongings from his cabin the following day. As the mayor bustled off to spread the news, Ryder and Katherine found themselves alone again. "You're staying," he said simply. "I'm staying," she confirmed, "for the teaching position." "Just for that?" Katherine met his gaze steadily. "No, not just for that." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm and full of promise. The next several days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Katherine moved into the teacherage, arranged her classroom, and met her future students, 23 children ranging in age from 6 to 16, with varying levels of previous education. Some of the older boys eyed her skeptically, clearly remembering their victory over the previous teacher. But Katherine met their challenging looks with calm authority. True to his word, Ryder brought the rest of her belongings from his cabin, along with salvaged items from her broken wagon. The damaged vehicle itself would have to wait for better weather and proper equipment to transport to town for repairs. On Sunday, Katherine attended church with the entire community, officially introduced as our new teacher, Miss Ellis from St. Louis. The warm welcome from most families reassured her that she had made the right decision professionally, at least. As for her personal decision regarding Ryder, he proved true to his word about courting her properly. He called at the teacherage that Sunday afternoon, hat in hand, to formally ask permission to visit her regularly. The gesture was old-fashioned but touching, and Katherine found herself looking forward to his company. Monday brought the first day of classes, and with it, the expected challenge from the older boys. Led by 16-year-old Thomas Jenkins, the sheriff's son, they tested her patience with whispered comments, feigned ignorance, and barely concealed insubordination. Katherine had faced such tactics before. Rather than losing her temper or showing weakness, she calmly assigned extra work, separated troublemakers, and demonstrated her mastery of the material. By day's end, an uneasy truce had been established. She had neither broken nor bent, and had earned, if not respect, then at least wariness. "How was your first day?" Ryder asked that evening when he stopped by with a small gift, a wooden pencil box he had carved himself, decorated with delicate flowers. "Challenging," Katherine admitted, running her fingers over the beautiful craftsmanship. "But not unexpected. It will take time to win them over." "You will," he said with such confidence that she almost believed it herself. The winter days settled into a pattern. Katherine taught during the week, gradually earning the trust and respect of her students. The younger children warmed to her first, delighted by her animated reading of stories and gentle patience with their struggles. The older girls followed, appreciating her knowledge and the respectful way she treated their questions. The older boys held out longest, but by February, even Thomas Jenkins was participating willingly in class discussions. Ryder visited 3 evenings a week and on Sundays after church. Their courtship progressed slowly, deliberately, as they learned each other's histories, preferences, and dreams. He told her about his time during the war, too young to fight but old enough to lose his father and home to it. She shared stories of her childhood, her passion for education, and her complicated relationship with her mother. February brought Valentine's Day, and with it, Ryder's first kiss, a gentle, almost tentative press of his lips against hers, as they stood on the teacherage porch after an evening of reading together. The simple contact sent sparks through Katherine's body, awakening a hunger she had scarcely acknowledged before. "I'm falling in love with you, Katherine Ellis," he whispered against her lips. "Have been since I found you in that storm." The words both thrilled and terrified her. "Ryder, you don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know where I stand." But Katherine found she wanted to say it after all. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the truth of it settling comfortably in her chest. "It terrifies me how quickly it's happening. We don't have to rush anything." His hands cupped her face with exquisite gentleness. "We have all the time in the world." By March, the snow was melting, revealing a landscape preparing for renewal. Katherine's students were showing remarkable progress, even the most reluctant learners now engaging with the material. The town council expressed their satisfaction with her methods and results, officially offering to renew her contract for the following school year. As spring advanced, Ryder began taking Katherine on rides through the countryside surrounding Old Tucson. He showed her his ranch, larger than she had imagined, with a main house he had built but never finished properly. "I always meant to complete it," he explained as they walked through the half-furnished rooms. "But with just me, it seemed unnecessary." Katherine wandered the spacious interior, imagining what it could become with care and attention. "It has good bones," she observed. "Why did you stay in the cabin instead?" The cabin was enough for one man. Ryder watched her move through what would have been the parlor. "This house. I built it for a family I didn't have." The implication hung between them, neither ready to address it directly yet both aware of its presence. April brought Easter celebrations, and with them, Katherine's formal introduction to wider territorial society at a gathering hosted by the territorial governor in Tucson proper. Ryder escorted her proudly, himself unaccustomed to such formal occasions but willing to endure them for her sake. "You look beautiful," he told her as they entered the lavishly decorated hall, Katherine wearing her best dress, a deep green silk she had saved for special occasions. "Every man here is envying me tonight." The evening was a swirl of introductions, conversations, and dancing. Katherine found herself enjoying the rare opportunity for sophisticated company, while noting that Ryder seemed increasingly uncomfortable as the night progressed. "Would you like to leave?" she asked quietly, finding him alone on the veranda, staring out at the desert night. He turned, offering a rueful smile. "Am I that obvious?" "Only to me." She joined him at the railing. "You don't enjoy these gatherings." "I'm not used to them," he admitted. "All this talking about nothing important, judging people by their clothes and who they know." He sighed. "I feel like a fraud here." "You're not a fraud." Katherine placed her hand over his. "You're exactly who you are, honest and direct. That's worth more than all the fancy words and fashionable opinions in there." He brought her hand to his lips. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I believe you were the one who found me," she reminded him with a smile. The journey back to Old Tucson the next day was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they neared town, Ryder suddenly spoke. "Would you walk with me a while? There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Katherine agreed. He led her to a small rise overlooking the town where a single cottonwood tree provided shade. From this vantage point, they could see Old Tucson spread below them, the schoolhouse prominent at its edge, and beyond that, the distant outline of Ryder's ranch lands. "I come here sometimes to think," he explained. "To see everything at once, the town, my land, the mountains beyond." "It's beautiful," Katherine said sincerely, appreciating the panoramic view. Ryder turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know we agreed to take things slowly to give ourselves time, but I find myself increasingly certain of what I want." Her heart began to race as she realized what was coming. "Ryder, please, let me finish while I have the courage." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Katherine Ellis. I think I loved you from that first moment in the snow, as impossible as that sounds. You've brought light and purpose into my life that I never knew was missing." Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer. The school term isn't finished and you may want time to consider. But I need you to know that whenever you're ready, I want to make a life with you. I want to finish that house and fill it with laughter and children and books." He gazed up at her, vulnerability and hope written across his features. "Katherine Ellis, will you marry me?" Time seemed to suspend as Katherine looked down at this man who had rescued her from a snowstorm, and in doing so had perhaps rescued her from a life half-lived. She thought of his quiet strength, his unwavering support, the way he valued her independence even as he offered partnership. "Yes," she said, the word emerging as a whisper before growing stronger. "Yes, Ryder Callahan, I will marry you." Joy transformed his face as he rose to his feet, gathering her into his arms. Their kiss was deeper than before, filled with promise and passion and the certainty of shared tomorrows. "When?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "The school term ends in May." "June," she decided. "After final examinations. That will give us time to prepare properly," he nodded, unable to stop smiling. "June it is." News of their engagement spread quickly through Old Tucson. Mrs. Holloway claimed credit for foreseeing it from the start, while Mayor Harrison jovially demanded assurance that Katherine would continue teaching after the wedding. Parents and students offered congratulations, though Katherine noticed some of the older girls sighing with romantic notions, while some of the boys seemed disappointed that their teacher would be just a married lady soon. "Nothing about you could ever be just anything," Ryder assured her when she mentioned these reactions. "You'll be the same extraordinary teacher, married or not." May brought the end of the school term and with it, examinations that proved the success of Katherine's methods. Even the most reluctant students had made significant progress, and the town council was unanimously pleased with the results. Katherine was formally offered a contract for the following year with a small raise in salary. "You'll be living at the ranch," Mayor Harrison noted with a twinkle in his eye. "But we'll make sure the teacherage is maintained for your use during inclement weather, so you needn't risk another snowstorm trying to get home." As the wedding approached, Katherine divided her time between finalizing arrangements and helping Ryder complete the interior of the main house. They worked side by side painting walls, hanging curtains Katherine had sewn, and arranging furniture Ryder had either crafted himself or purchased from a cabinet maker in Tucson. "It's becoming a real home," he observed one evening as they stood in the completed parlor, admiring their handiwork. "Your touch is everywhere. Our home," Katherine corrected, leaning into his embrace. "Built by both of us for both of us." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect June morning. The ceremony was held in the church, which had been decorated with wildflowers gathered by Katherine's students. She wore a new dress of ivory silk ordered specially from San Francisco, while Ryder cut a handsome figure in a black suit that made him look both distinguished and slightly uncomfortable. "You clean up well, Cowboy," she teased when they finally had a moment alone after the ceremony. "Don't get used to it," he replied with a grin. "Back to practical clothes tomorrow." The celebration continued well into the evening, with the entire town participating in the festivities. There was dancing in the street, abundant food prepared by the women of the community, and more than a few emotional toasts to the couple's happiness. As night fell, they slipped away to begin their new life together, riding to the ranch house that was now truly their home. Ryder lifted Katherine from her horse and carried her across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor they had furnished together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Callahan," he said softly. "It has a nice ring to it," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Though I'll still be Miss Ellis at school." Whatever you wish. His arms encircled her waist. I'm just grateful you're here, that you stayed, that you chose this life, chose me. Best decision I ever made, Katherine assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Though I believe we have one more room to christen tonight. Ryder's eyes darkened with desire as he swept her into his arms once more, carrying her toward the bedroom they had prepared but not yet shared. I believe you're right, Mrs. Callahan, and we have all night to do it properly. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Katherine continued teaching, eventually establishing a reputation throughout the territory for her progressive methods and excellent results. Ryder's ranch prospered, expanding as the railroad brought new opportunities for cattle shipping. Their first child, a son they named William after Ryder's father, arrived a year after their wedding, a sturdy, healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression. Katherine took a brief respite from teaching, but was back in the classroom by the following term, often with young William napping in a basket beside her desk. A daughter, Rebecca, joined the family 2 years later, followed by twins Sarah and James the year after that. The house that had once seemed too large for one man now rang with children's laughter and the happy chaos of family life. As old Tucson grew, so did the school. 5 years after Katherine's arrival, the town built a larger schoolhouse and hired an additional teacher to assist with the growing number of students. Katherine was appointed head teacher, responsible for the older students and the curriculum development for all grades. 10 years after that fateful snowstorm brought them together, Ryder and Katherine stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over the mountains. "Any regrets?" Ryder asked, his arm around her waist, his voice soft in her ear. Katherine turned to look at him, noting the silver now threading through his brown hair, the deeper creases around his eyes when he smiled. The years had only made him more handsome to her eyes, adding character and wisdom to his features. "Not one," she replied honestly. "Though I still think about how close I came to missing all this, if that wheel hadn't broken, if you hadn't found me in the storm." "I would have found you somehow," Ryder said with quiet certainty. "I meant what I said that day. I'd been looking for you all my life without knowing it." "Such a romantic," she teased, though his words still had the power to warm her heart after all these years. "Only with you." He kissed her temple gently. "Only ever with you." As they stood together watching their children, Katherine reflected on the strange, wonderful path that had led her here. The storm that had seemed a disaster had actually been the beginning of everything good in her life. The broken wheel, the blinding snow, the cowboy who appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was making, all had conspired to bring her exactly where she belonged. "I love you, Ryder Callahan," she said, leaning into his embrace. "Today and always." "And I love you, Katherine Callahan," he replied, his voice rich with emotion. "Today and always." The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to the life they had built together, a life of love and learning, of family and community, of a schoolteacher and a cowboy who had found each other in a snowstorm and never let go.